Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Turtley, Texas webinar. We're hosted by Texas Sea Grant and the Inland Ocean Coalition North Texas chapter. Today's presentation is focused on sea turtles in Texas, and we will be covering several topics related to the health of sea turtles in the Lone Star State. I'd like to introduce the organizations and presenters here today. Texas Sea Grant College program is dedicated to understanding wise use and stewardship of the state's coastal and marine resources. It is part of a network of 34 university-based programs in coastal and Great Lakes states that operate as a partnership between state governments and National Oceanic Atmospheric Association or Administration, otherwise known as NOAA, of the U.S. Department of Commerce. Texas Sea Grant is a unique partnership that unites the resources of the federal government, the state of Texas, and universities across the state to create knowledge, tools, products, and services that benefit the economy, the environment, and the citizens of Texas. The Inland Ocean Coalition is based in Boulder, Colorado, and supports our local North and Central Texas chapters. The organization aims to bring ocean protection to inland communities and empower inland voices to make impacts seen from the west to east coast. Our guest speakers today are Dr. Natalie Wilderman with Plotkin Lab and a postdoctoral research associate with Texas A&M University. And we also have Laura Picarillo, a fisheries specialist with Texas Sea Grant. And lastly, we have Jace Tunnell, Director of Mission Aransas, National Estuarine Research Reserve with the University of Texas Marine Science Institute. My name is April Tovar, and I am part of the leadership team in the North Texas chapter of the Inland Ocean Coalition. We really do appreciate your participation in our webinar today, and we'll provide a recording and further notes to everyone who registered for today's event. And when the presenters are making the presentations, if you come up with questions, go ahead and throw those into the chat box, and we will get to those at the end of the webinar. We will begin our presentation with Natalie. Natalie, go ahead and please share your screen and catch us up to speed with sea turtles in Texas. Yeah, Natalie, we're showing that you are current. Yeah, there we go.
Well, thank you very much, April. Welcome, everyone, and thank you to the Inland Ocean Coalition for giving us the opportunity to talk today to you about turtles in Texas. So my name is Natalie Wilderman, and I'm going to be joined today by Laura Picarillo and Jace Tunnell. So, okay, so let's talk about sea turtles. Sea turtles are reptiles and they live in the water, but they do have lungs and therefore they need to come out to the surface to breathe. And they do that quite often, even though they can hold their breath for very long. Unlike the tortoises or land turtles, they can't retract their heads and their flippers inside their skull, so they need other ways, other strategies to protect themselves against predators. They're very agile and the carapace is really, really strong. So these are some of the ways they can protect themselves. They do start their life on land. So when a turtle mama comes out to the beach and lays her eggs, they're soft-shelled eggs. They bury them in the sand, and a nest can have between 50 and 150 eggs, depending on the species. Another turtle fun fact is that humans, they rely on the chromosomes to know if you're a female or a male. But in turtles, it depends on the temperature of the sand. So if the eggs are incubated in a beach that has very hot temperatures, most of the turtles are going to be female. And if the sand temperature is very cool, then most of them are going to be male. This is very important in light of climate change and global warming, because with warmer temperatures, we're getting some beaches with a lot of female turtles.
Hey, Natalie, if you don't mind if I jump in real quick. Some of our viewers are having trouble hearing you. Can you speak up a little bit louder for us, please?
Yes, of course. Can you hear me better like this?
That's great. Thank you so much.
I'll just hold the microphone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you for the suggestion. Okay, so after about 60 days, depending on the species, the hatchlings come out of the nest and they start to moving towards the lightest horizon. And in most cases, or under natural conditions, this would be the reflection of the moon and the stars on the sea. But nowadays, with so much coastal development, there's a lot of lights coming back from the houses and the streets. So there's a lot of times where hatchlings get disoriented and go backwards in the wrong direction. But for those hatchlings that do get to the sea, they spend the rest of their lives in the water. They can be in a very different habitats from the open ocean, like the two top pictures, or in more coastal environments like seagrass or coral reefs, like two bottom pictures. And it depends, and this changes throughout their life, depending on the species as well. So once they're ready to reproduce when they're adults, males and females meet back near the nesting beaches. They breed, and the female turtle comes back to the beach to lay her eggs. And interestingly, the female turtles will come back to nest to the exact region, and in many cases the exact same beach where they hatched. Another turtle fun fact is that sea turtles actually have been around for a very long time, over 200 million years. They survived the meteorite that caused extinction of dinosaurs. However, they are endangered nowadays. So are we really worse than a meteorite? We might as well be, but at least we have ways to answer those problems as well. So some of the threats, or the major threats that turtles face nowadays, are climate change. On the top left, you can see a beach that has been eroded because of the rise in the sea level. You can see that the eggs are exposed there. On the top right, you can see a seagrass habitat that has been degraded with an increase in vessel traffic in recreational areas and coastal habitats. You often see these scars in the seagrass because of the way the propellers are moving across very shallow waters. There's also a lot of impacts from fisheries. There's a lot of bycatch, unintended capture of sea turtles. There's also a problem with ghost nets, and ghost nets are parts of nets that are either thrown away in the water or are just lost in the water, and they just drift and take everything that they find, including turtles. And last but not least important, it's that pollution, and this spans from oil spills to the very big problem of plastic pollution. Turtles they don't know if they are eating a plastic bag or a jellyfish or a plastic bit or their food. So this can have really bad consequences for their health and even their death. So these here are the 7 species that we can find in the world. And there are 5 of them in the Gulf of Mexico and in Texas. And I like to think that turtles are very mystifying creatures, and they do have kind of superpowers. So I'm gonna go ahead and name one superpower for one of each species. So first we have the Kemp's ridley turtle. This is the smallest of all the turtles, and she nests only here in Texas and Mexico. She's native of the Gulf of Mexico, and therefore it's very special for our area. In the 1940s, they were really abundant. This photo is in Mexico, in Rancho Nuevo, and they have estimated that about 40,000 eggs were laid just in this picture. However, just two decades afterwards, this species was almost extinct. Thanks to different arrangements, like a binational arrangement between Mexico and the USA. They also flew some eggs from Mexico to Texas. They had a lot of conservation measures. They did a lot of modifications to the shrimp trawler fisheries, and Laura's going to talk more about that. They were able to literally bring back the Kemp's ridley turtle from the extinction. And that's also one of the reasons why it's been declared as the official state turtle here in Texas. So she's a real proud Texan turtle. Next, we have the green turtle, which, like Captain Marvel, it's very fit and agile. This is the only turtle that once they are adults, it's mostly herbivorous, so they only eat or mostly eat seagrass and algae. It's probably why they keep so fit as well. Then we have the loggerhead turtle. They are very, very strong, especially they have a big head and very strong jaw. And they can break a lot of shells, crabs, and even human bones. So you have to be really careful around them. Then we have the hawksbill turtle, which is, when they're adults, it's the only species that specializes in sponges. And sponges can be very toxic for a lot of species. So they're very special creatures because they can eat these types of animals. And that makes their flesh and their meat also kind of poisonous. So people have gotten sick because they have eaten hawksbill meat. And last but definitely not least is the leatherback turtle. It's the biggest turtle of all. It's literally a dinosaur among our creatures. They can weigh up to 2,000 pounds and can dive into the deep ocean up to 4,000 feet. Their shell is more flexible. It's not hard shelled as the other species, and that allows them to withstand those type of pressure. So she's the Aquaman turtle. Aquaman among the turtles. So you should be getting soon on your screens. There it is, a poll. So tell us, just if you could choose one of these, which super turtle would you like to be? Let us know. We'll give you the answer, the total answer, in a few minutes. So here in Texas, where can you find turtles? You can virtually find turtles in any bay here in Texas. You will mostly find green sea turtles, juvenile green sea turtles, but also some loggerheads, Kemp's ridleys, and hawksbill turtles. This is how a juvenile green sea turtle will look like in a rocky area, a pier or a jetty, and this is very common to see. Just a few days ago, I was here in Corpus Christi looking down at the bayfront, and we saw a few green turtles pop up in just half an hour. We also can find turtles in the open ocean here in the open sea and the Gulf of Mexico. They can be close to oil platforms. They can be close to or inside seaweed patches. You can find all 5 species. They also use this area as migration corridors to move from Mexico towards the Eastern Gulf. Unfortunately, we can also find turtles stranded in the Gulf here in Texas throughout the year. During the summer months, it's more common to find them, like the one the picture on the left. This turtle was entangled in a ghost net and stranded because of that. And during the winter months, there's also a phenomenon called cold stunning. Because of the cold temperatures, the turtles can function well. So their metabolism slows down and they start to float. And in many cases, they can be saved. So if you happen to be on a beach and see a stranded turtle, make sure to contact the Turtle Stranding and Salvage Network, and they'll know what to do. And finally, you can also see turtles in Texas nesting. And remember the Kemp's ridley turtle. Now we have a stable population in Padre Island. You can also find some nesting along the rest of the coast of Texas, mostly Kemp's ridley, but some green and loggerhead turtles as well. So if you remember our story about the surviving phoenix of the turtles, now Laura's gonna give you more details about how this became a conservation success story.
Okay, Natalie, I think you have to stop sharing your screen so that I can share mine.
Yep, I just did so.
Okay, great. Thanks, Natalie. And I will get this up and running here. And sorry, let's just get this going as a slideshow for you all. Okay, can everybody hear me all right? Hopefully. Please let me know if you can't. I'm going to take some time here to talk a little bit about sea turtles and their interactions with fisheries, and specifically the shrimp fishery, which has had a long and not always very pleasant history in interacting with sea turtles. But in the end, this turned out to be a very good conservation success story, and there's a lot of positives to come out of this. So just to give you guys a little background and some fun facts about shrimp, Americans also love shrimp almost as much as they love turtles. In 2017, the US consumed 2 billion pounds of shrimp. That's 4.5 pounds of shrimp per person. Shrimp is a really important source of healthy protein, and it is a big part of the US diet. The Gulf of Mexico shrimp fishery is the largest shrimp fishery in the US, and it's also the largest fishery and the most valuable fishery in the Gulf of Mexico. In 2018, the Gulf landed over 2 million pounds of shrimp, which was worth nearly $4 million. And that was about a third of that is landed directly here in Texas. Texas shrimp fishery accounts for over 90% of the commercial seafood that's landed here in Texas. It is our local seafood. And the Gulf of Mexico shrimp fishery is also culturally a very strong part of the fabric of coastal communities, as was certainly highlighted by the movie Forrest Gump. And his pal Bubba's comments about shrimp being the fruit of the sea, and introducing us to Bayou La Battery, Alabama, which is still one of the biggest shrimp ports in the Gulf, and is a really important part of that culture. But we also have some very significant shrimping communities here in Texas. And that spans our entire coast, from the upper coast of Texas and Port Arthur all the way down through the central coast in Palacios, and then the lower coast in Port Isabel and Brownsville. So, you know, this Texas shrimp industry is a really important industry here. And unlike a lot of other fisheries that have become very industrialized, you know, the shrimp fishery in the Gulf, and particularly in Texas, is still operated by very small independent operators and family-owned businesses. And many of these communities are considered fishery dependent, particularly places like Palacios, where the largest part of their income in many ways in that community is through fisheries and seafood. How the shrimp fishery works. Well, shrimp live on the bottom of the seafloor, typically in muddy or sandy bottom habitats for the shrimp that we catch to eat. And so fishermen use nets that skim the bottom of the ocean, and those are called trawls, which, as one might imagine, trawling can be a challenge because nets can catch a lot of other things besides shrimp. And there's a lot of other things that live in the ocean and in the seafloor near where we trawl for shrimp, which leads us to a very unfortunate situation called bycatch. Bycatch is the unwanted fish and other marine creatures that are caught unintentionally while fishing for different species. And unfortunately, the shrimp fishery in the Gulf was once one of the worst offenders with regard to bycatch, and had very high bycatch levels in the shrimp fishery. In the 1980s, studies showed that for every pound of shrimp that we caught, 10 pounds of bycatch were caught. That's for the Gulf of Mexico shrimp fishery. There are fisheries internationally that are even higher than that. And bycatch can include anything from fish and sharks and rays to, unfortunately, also turtles. Shrimp and turtles share a lot of habitat. As we saw from the life cycle that Natalie shared with us, the turtle life cycle comes all the way from the land to the sea, and they live in many different types of habitats in the ocean. As you see on the left here, the shrimp life cycle is not all that different. Shrimp don't actually come on land, of course, but they do come into our bay systems as juveniles to grow. And then once they are bigger, they move back offshore as adults, where we find larger shrimp and where shrimp spawn, and then that spawn comes back into the Gulf. And so almost every aspect of the life cycles of shrimp and turtles overlap. And if you're trying to catch shrimp, you're probably also going to encounter turtles. Turtles and shrimp nets are a very lethal combination. As Natalie mentioned earlier, turtles can have to breathe air, and they can hold their breath for a long time. Most of the turtles in the Gulf can hold their breath up to 45 minutes to an hour. But if they're caught in a trawl net for too long, then they are going to drown. And unfortunately, by the 1970s, all 5 species of the sea turtles that Natalie mentioned earlier that are found in the Gulf of Mexico were listed as endangered species. And most critically, the Kemp's ridley turtle was close to the brink of extinction. In the 80s, it was discovered that the Kemp's ridley turtles only had a few hundred nesting females left. And as Natalie also mentioned, they are native to the Gulf and only nest in Texas and Mexico beaches. And so this became an extremely big concern for us here in Texas and in the Gulf, and for the shrimp fishery that operates in the same place. The shrimp fishery was identified as the #1 threat to rebuilding sea turtle populations. So how do we continue to catch shrimp without catching turtles? Actually is a strange and roundabout story, which had to do with jellyfish. About the same time that we were having these discussions and trying to find some designs for the shrimp fishery to keep operating, in Georgia, shrimpers were having a bunch of problems over there with these big jellyfish called cannonball jellies that kept getting caught in their nets, and it would clog up their nets, and it made the fishery a mess. And so fishermen started messing around with different designs and things to try to figure out how to get these jellyfish out of their nets. And they developed a system of a grid with a kind of a trapdoor style that actually allowed the jellyfish to get pushed out of the net while the shrimp kept continuing on through the grid. And scientists realized, well, gosh, this could be the exact design that we need to figure out how to get turtles to escape from shrimp nets. And the turtle excluder device was developed. So it looks like a pretty basic device. You've got a net, you see the turtle that's in the net there on the top side that's gotten caught, and it's gonna encounter a grid that's at an angle, and it's gonna pop right out what looks like that trap door there. It's a flap on the net. So it is in many ways a simple device, but in practicality, being dragged in the water and all of the water dynamics, there are a lot of very specific things that have to go into the designs of these to make sure that they're working right. If the angle is too steep, the turtle could just get stuck on it and keep getting pushed along in the pressure. If the angle is too low, it won't get the turtle up and out through that flap. The measurements have to be right to make sure that it's going to allow something like a leatherback turtle to get out of that flap, even at its large size. So I have a short video here for you, and hopefully this video clip will go well. And this is actually a video of a shrimp trawl being dragged underwater. So the trawl is moving towards the left of the screen. That was a turtle excluder device. And this turtle now in the net is moving its way back as the trawl continues to move forward. And in just a second here, it's going to move far enough back in this net that it's going to encounter that grid for the turtle excluder device. And that grid is going to angle the turtle right on up, and in a second here, right on out of this flap, and freedom. And that's a NOAA diver that's been testing this, that's helping to make sure that that turtle escapes. And so we have a few different shots here. Here's from inside of the net, watching that turtle meet the grid and pop out. And then we have one last image for you at the front of the net, underneath that flap, and we're going to see a smiley turtle come on out of here and swim its way to freedom. And off he goes to happiness. So, sorry, I don't want to play. There we go. So, turtle excluder devices became a major success story, and exactly what we needed to be able to save not only sea turtles, but also our shrimp fishery, which is an important part of our coastal communities, and was under threat of being shut down completely. TEDs are 97% effective at allowing turtles to escape from trawls, and they became mandatory in the shrimp fishery in late 1989 and were in widespread use by the 90s. To give you the scope of just how bad the situation was, prior to TEDs, it was estimated that potentially up to 70,000 turtles were killed in shrimp trawl fisheries prior to their implementation. But success with TEDs, we saw a really dramatic reduction in turtle bycatch in the shrimp fishery. So a study in 2012 or 2011 showed that between 1990 and 2007, due to the use of TEDs and the shrinking of the shrimp fishery, because it is smaller now than it used to be, we've reduced any sort of interactions with turtles by 60%, and we've reduced turtle deaths by over 90%. So that chart on the top is showing you in blue, it's age 2 through 4-year-old turtles, and in red is age 5-year-old turtles. And the chart is showing you turtle deaths in the shrimp fishery until it reaches that time scale on the bottom of 1990, where we see a significant drop off, showing that TEDs are in fact effective and have been able to reduce mortality of turtles in the shrimp fishery. And this brings us back to our Kemp's ridley turtle and the amazing recovery efforts. So as Natalie mentioned, there are a lot of different efforts that have gone on to help recovery of the Kemp's ridley. So these amazing nesting achievements are not certainly just from turtle excluder devices. But one of the most important aspects of Kemp's ridley recovery was making sure that turtles are protected not only on the beach, where the nesting beach is needed to be protected from poaching, but also in the water, and making sure that once they were in that water environment, they were protected from shrimp trawls and other dangers that we had the ability to protect them from. And so we have seen amazing recovery from the Kemp's ridley turtle. Just to go through a couple of other notes, you know, the exciting thing about TEDs is that they don't just exclude turtles, they exclude a lot of other things as well, including large fish, sharks, and rays. And the shrimp fishery, after the success of TEDs, also started investigating other devices now called bycatch reduction devices, or BIRDs, that are designs that help reduce other species like finfish. And so we have all of these interesting designs now, these different types of holes in the net and different types of mesh that help many different types of animals escape shrimp nets while still retaining as much shrimp as possible. And so, you know, NOAA Fisheries, who manages our fisheries in the United States, started implementing bird regulations in the fishery as well. And bycatch rates, that ratio of shrimp to bycatch has reduced all the way down to somewhere between 2 and 2.5 pounds to 1 pound of shrimp now, which is definitely a strong improvement over 10 to 1. And we are continuing to work to make sure that we reduce that factor even more. So the story continues. The shrimp fishery every year works closely both with NOAA Fisheries, their gear monitoring team, as well as us here at Texas Sea Grant. We do annual dockside inspections where the shrimpers voluntarily allow us on their boats to do inspections of their gear, check to make sure that their TEDs and their birds are all working optimally, and making sure that they're going to reduce as much bycatch as possible. We have very strong compliance in the shrimp fishery. There are several agencies just here in Texas. NOAA has an enforcement agency, as well as Texas Parks and Wildlife game wardens and the U.S. Coast Guard all enforce TED regulations here in Texas. And the fines for TEDs that are not in compliance are extremely high, depending on the type of violation, and can be in the thousands of dollars. They can also take your shrimp and some other, possibly even your gear, depending on the violation. And we're continuing as well to do a lot of research to improve those technologies. We also have a few other things that protect turtles and reduce impacts in the shrimp fishery. One, as I mentioned earlier, we've reduced the size of our fleets. Both Texas here, we have a buyback program for shrimp licenses to reduce the number of shrimpers that are fishing in our waters, as well as our federal permits are limited. So the shrimp fishery only operates at about 50% of the effort that it did back in the 1990s. And we have a fishery enclosure area, this huge pink triangle area that you see here. And actually this does extend all the way into state waters because Texas closes its state waters as well. Completely closes to shrimp fishing activity from May 15th until July 15th every year, which coincides with the height of turtle nesting season, which normally runs from about April to August here. So there's a large portion of time when we know that turtles are in our waters here in Texas where the shrimp fishery is completely shut down. So the Texas shrimp fishery has made some significant efforts to become a sustainable fishery, and those efforts continue as research continues and more efforts with the industry and outreach occur. Conservation also comes with some costs though. They are certainly worthwhile costs and necessary for the protection and conservation of our habitat, but shrimpers pay a lot of money for the gear that they need to use and some of the shrimp that they lose when they are using these turtle excluder devices and bycatch reduction devices. And so I say this only to say that purchasing sustainable seafood like shrimp from the Gulf of Mexico is helping to support conservation efforts so that these fisheries can continue to make these improvements and become better operators. So supporting sustainable seafood, how do you find it? The easiest and biggest recommendation is buy US seafood. The United States has some of the best fisheries management in the world, and there's always room for improvement, and it continues to do so. So check your labels when you're buying seafood in a store. Ask your server when you're at a restaurant. You can check online. Most retailers and even some restaurants actually have their seafood sustainability sourcing policies online now. And so there's a lot of ways that you can find out where your seafood is coming from to make sure that you're supporting sustainable seafood. So thank you all. We'll take some questions at the end, and I'll go ahead and I will pass it on along to Jace.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was amazing. That video was incredible. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Another threat that is against the sea turtles is plastic pollution. And, you know, being in an inland community here in North Texas, I know that what we do up here can have its effect down the coast and affect the habitats and so forth. So, Jace, do you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about your work and the plastic pollution?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Great presentation so far, and I love that. I don't know how I get on that dive trip for trying to save the turtles from the nets. That looks pretty cool. Kind of dangerous too. So today I'll be talking to you about NURDLES, and I'm at the Mission Aransas Research Reserve there at UTMSI in Port Aransas. Luckily, we're not getting hit by a hurricane, but unfortunately, some folks up in the northern Texas and Louisiana are. So we're hopeful for them that they'll make it through okay. So NURDLES, what are NURDLES? People ask me all the time, oh, why do you call them NURDLES? Did you make that up? No, I didn't make this up. This has been around for decades. Actually, the name originated somewhere in Europe back in the early 1990s. But these are small plastic pellets, so they're the basis of everything plastic. So you see all these things up in the right-hand corner, colored bowls. I mean, almost anything that you use, your glasses, your computer, parts of your car. I mean, anything plastic was first this small plastic pellet that's manufactured and then shipped around the world to factories that melt them down, add color, and then, you know, they show up on your stores' shelves. So these plastic pellets have never even been made into anything. They've been let out into the environment before they've made it to their final destination. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, is how they're getting out and what some of those impacts are. The ones that we're finding that are washing up on the beach, you know, if any of y'all recycle, you see this chart up here from 1 to 7. It tells you what type of plastic it is. And so the number 4s and 5s, so the low density polyethylene, and the number 5, the polypropylene, those are the two that we are finding washing up on our shores. And why do you think that is? Well, it has to do with the density of the plastic. So a lot of these other ones are getting out into the environment, but we're not finding those because likely they're just sinking to the bottom. So how do these get out into the environment? Well, after they make these plastic pellets at a manufacturing site, they store them in these big silos. And to get them out of the silos to ship them somewhere, they need to be able to put them onto a rail car or a truck or bag them up and put them on into containers and onto ships. And so during all of those processes and throughout the supply chain, there's an opportunity for these pellets to get out into the environment. Because they're only the size of a lentil, they're super lightweight, they're hard to contain. And so here you'll see in the middle, there's a blue corrugated tube that's hooking up to a rail car. You know, whenever that tube hooks up, you hook it up or take it off, you know, pellets could fall out of that tube. You see here on the left-hand side, there's a guy picking up a bunch of pellets that fell on a railroad. So hopefully that's not that common. But you know, on the size of a quarter, on the head of a quarter, you can probably fit 30 to 40 of these pellets. So that tells you how small they are. So if just a little bit falls on the ground, then what happens to anything on the ground? It rains, gets into the stormwater, the nearest creek, then to the bay, then to the ocean, then it's washing up on our beaches. And so that's kind of the process it goes through. Now, things that are less likely that happen, and this happened a couple of weeks ago in the Mississippi River, actually. One of these container ships had lost some bags of nurdles that fell out, and there was a massive spill in the Mississippi River around New Orleans. When something like this happens in the ocean or something, you know, usually that's recorded, documented. They can do modeling to see where these pellets are going to go up, wash up to, and things like that. So that's less likely things that happen. But on a daily basis, the chronic problem are these little spills that happen on a daily basis. So this isn't something new. The Environmental Protection Agency came up with a report in 1992 called The Plastic Pellets in the Aquatic Environment, and Sources and Recommendations. And so they knew that there was a problem at that time, and they compiled this technical report that was really a bunch of research papers that had been done in the late 80s to early 90s to figure out what the impacts are. And really the biggest impact is to the wildlife. So sea turtles, birds, and shrimp. They list over 80 species of birds that they knew about in 1992 that were eating these pellets. This is an image here of a sea turtle, an X-ray that was taken in 2018 by the Amos Rehabilitation Keep that Alicia Walker runs over there. But this is a pellet, or we believe was a pellet inside of the intestines of a sea turtle. And then 2 weeks later, another X-ray was done, and that wasn't there. And so remember, these things float, and the way the system works at the Ark, where these sea turtles are being rehabilitated, is anything that floats gets washed out. But that's just another example. Dr. Pamela Plotkin and Tony Amos back in the late 80s had actually looked at the guts of 4 different species of sea turtles, and they found that over 7% of them had these plastic pellets in their gut, along with a lot of other plastics. And we know that the younger the turtle is, the more plastic that's in there that they tend to eat and that's in their guts. The image that you see here, this black and white image, is the intestinal tract of a shorebird. And so, you know, most likely a lot of these animals probably just pass these pellets through, but if they eat enough of them, it can clog their intestinal tract, then they end up starving to death. The other bad things about these pellets is once they're in the environment, they're like sponges. They absorb these harmful chemicals. And so, you know, do these chemicals leach out? You know, and the chemicals we're talking about are PCBs, DDTs, PAHs, you know, all this stuff that you don't want on your skin. You definitely don't want it in your body, and we don't want that for animals either. And so what we don't know is if there's a human health impact to these yet. So, you know, the fish eating these, do those chemicals that are in the nurdles leave the nurdle, go outside the stomach wall and into the muscle tissue that we are then eating? I think that we'll probably have that answer in the next few years since the technology is there. But there was a nurdle spill in Corpus Christi back in 2018, and you know, I called it in to the Coast Guard. They called the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. There was a lot of other agencies that were responded to this, but nobody knew how to deal with it because they hadn't had to deal with it before. And so it wasn't cleaned up. This is the exact same thing that's happening right now in New Orleans on the Mississippi River. Nobody knows how to clean it up. It's not considered a hazardous material. And so there's not a responsible party to pay for it. So we started up the NURDLE Patrol. We wanted to find out where all these pellets are coming from. So we do 10-minute surveys at the beach, along the riverbank, the lake shore, wherever you're at, 10-minute survey. How many pellets you find, you go to nurdlepatrol.org and put your concentration in there. And it really does show a picture of where these pellets might be coming from. And so we're using that information to try to change policy at the state level in a number of different states. So if you go to nurdlepatrol.org and you put your data in there from your 10-minute survey, this is what it looks like. And so the green dots are 0, so none were found. And then once you get to the yellows, you get 1 to 30 pellets. And then as you go and get to the warmer colors, it's the higher concentration. And so purples are over 1,000 pellets found in 10-minute period. So that's a lot of pellets, right? Well, you'd be surprised that it's not that uncommon to find that many in certain areas of the country. So I'm going to zoom in to the Gulf of Mexico here, since we're talking turtley Texas, right? So we'll look at Texas. And what I think is interesting about this image here is look at Florida. There's hardly any pellets that are being found over there. And why do you think that is? One could be currents and the way the Gulf of Mexico currents work. But the other is there's very few manufacturers or distributors of pellets in Florida. Where is the highest concentration in the Gulf of Mexico? It's in the Houston area of Texas. And so what we'll do is we'll just zoom right into Galveston. And this is the highest concentration of plastic pellet manufacturers in the Gulf of Mexico. And look at all the purples. This is over 1,000 collected in a 10-minute period. And down by Texas City, down there is it was the record before this Mississippi spill, but there was 30,000 collected in a 10-minute period. So I've been to this bay system and I've collected along here, and you can pick up handfuls. After a rainfall, you can pick up 250, 300 per handful. And so that tells you that there's a real problem here, that there's it's 100% preventable. And so that's what we're looking at doing. And then if you're on the map, and you click a dot, you want to know when the data was collected, what type of data, and stuff like that. Like this little box shows up and it tells you, okay, there was 7,290 that were collected in 10 minutes at Morgan's Point there in Galveston Bay. And it tells you the date and stuff like that. So any community can put data in there, and they can start collecting, not just on the beach, but they can go up in the bay systems. They can go up in their watersheds. And this is a tool, you can print this. So this is printable to digital or hard copy, and you can take it to your elected officials and your state representatives and say, look, we've got a problem, we've got to do something about it. And we also got a publication for the methodology, because we wanted to make sure that when the data is collected, it could be used not only for future researchers, but also in litigation. And so there's a couple areas around the country where they're using the NURDLE Patrol data in litigation scenarios because the methodology is comparable all across the country. And that's an open source publication, so anyone can download it. It's free. You can send it to whoever you want. So the latest stats as of a few days ago was we have over 2,100 volunteers that have sent data in so far, over 5,700 surveys across the country at over 2,800 sites. And we now have 61 partners, organizations that we're working with. And so what can be done about this? You see all this problems, like what can we actually do about this? Well, stricter stormwater permits is one thing so this goes to the state. The state regulates these manufacturers, and most states in the country say they allow, like I'll just give you an example for Texas. The permits in Texas say that the manufacturers are allowed a trace amount of suspended solids. And so it doesn't even talk about plastics. And so that needs to change. We need to say 0 pellet loss. in all these stormwater permits. That allows for the inspectors and the investigators that go to these facilities. If they find one nurdle, they can start their regulatory process of making them do some changes on site, fines, stuff like that. Whereas right now, it's not that way. We have a couple of tools that people can go to. Get on Facebook, Nurdle Patrol Facebook. It's a closed group, but people are posting all the time of what they're finding where. And then nurdlepatrol.org is the website that you can go put your data in and print up your own maps and all that. And there's also some other stuff. Now, there was a FORMOSA settlement. Y'all might have heard of this. This is up in Point Comfort. Diane Wilson led the charge and the waterkeeper up there. And they were able to sue FORMOSA for discharging plastic pellets for a number of years. And they sued for 50 million. Nurdle Patrol got $1 million of that. And we're creating these startup kits that we're sending to organizations that are interested in starting up their own Nurdle Patrol efforts or incorporating in Nurdle surveys into their existing program. So if y'all are interested, if you're involved with an organization that's interested in this, we're currently putting these together. We should be able to mail them out in 2 to 3 weeks. So send me an email, and my email will be at the end of this presentation. So why do we care about all this? These are my kids, Jack and Parker. You know, they ought to be at the beach swimming in the water and picking up seashells, right? Instead, I'm making them pick up plastic pellets out there, and that's not right. So there's something we can do about this. You know, we're at the point now to where we know it's a problem. We've got it mapped out. Let's do something about it so you can be part of that change. These are about half of our partners that we have right now working on it, and the real thanks goes to all the citizen scientists that are collecting the data. And so I want to thank y'all for that. Oh, and I was told to talk about the Texas NURDLE bill. So this is my last slide. Texas NURDLE bill is what I just talked about, stricter stormwater permits. The Texas Surfrider Foundation, the Surfrider Foundation here in the Texas Coastal Bend wrote a bill to go into this next legislative session. And it has to do with making stricter stormwater permits and wastewater permits as well. And so that is currently in legislative council and is about to come back to us. And then we're going to start sending it around for organizations to sign on to. So if y'all are interested in that as well, get onto nurdlepatrol.org, and we make announcements almost on a daily basis on new stuff coming out on that. But with that, I'll say thanks and take any questions.
Thank you so much, Jace. That was real eye-opening. I don't think a lot of people realize how many plastic production plants are here in Texas, especially in North Texas, because I actually did my first survey on Sunday, and I don't know if my camera will let me show it, but I got a bottle of NURDLES, about 90 of them. So you would think that, you know, it's mostly a coastal thing, but they are found up here in the DFW area. So if I ordered one of the kits from Jace, so if you want to go hunting for NURDLES with me with the Inland Ocean Coalition North Texas chapter, feel free to reach out to me and we can set something up. A big thank you to all of our speakers, but I wanted to go back to Natalie just to go over some success stories and what people can do, you know, either if they're in the coast or in inland state or inland cities, you know, what can we do to help out with these sea turtles and the plastic pollution and so forth?
Thank you, April. Those were two really good presentations. Thanks, Laura and Dave. So I'm going to share my screen next. So if you are wondering which of the turtles won,
Yes. The Kemp's looks like it's a tie between the Kemp's ridley and the aqua turtle.
So we have a tie between people wanting to do phoenixes and people wanting to go to the deep ocean. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. So next, I'm going to talk to you about a few of our projects here at Texas Sea Grant. So the first one is the Matagorda Bay Ecosystem Assessment.
I'm sorry, Natalie, can you bring the microphone up to your mouth?
Yes.
Thank you so
Sorry.
much. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the first project I'm going to briefly talk about is the Matagorda Bay Ecosystem Assessment, and this is funded by the Office of the Comptroller in Texas, and it's a multidisciplinary study among researchers from all the organizations you can see in the slide. And the aim is to come up with effective conservation strategies for sea turtles and birds in Matagorda Bay here in Texas. But not looking only at the turtles and the birds in isolation, but looking at how the complete environment around them shapes where they go and how they use the bay. So our part of the project is with sea turtles. And one of the things we're doing is we're putting satellite trackers or GPS trackers on them. So this little black box on top of the turtle, that's a GPS tracker. And when the turtle comes out to breathe to the surface, if the conditions are right, then it will connect to the satellites and send the location of the turtle. And then from my computer, I get the locations. It looks something like this. So we put the tracker up here in Port O'Connor in November. And every point, every red point is one location that the tracker was able to send to us. And the turtle started to move down San Antonio Bay into Aransas Bay. And then by April, she was staying within a little bay. You can see it here in a zoomed picture in a little bay around mangroves and seagrass. Another one of our projects is the iSeaturtle app, and anyone can download this app on their smartphones and they can use it on any bay in Texas, but we're focusing right now on the Matagorda Bay. This app encourages citizens to contribute to sea turtle science and to motivate them. Anyone can be a scientist with this app. So it's really easy. You just go into the water, and if you see a turtle, you open the app, click on send location, submit, and it automatically goes into our map. And this map is publicly available at the website on the bottom. And this was just a few days ago. We have a little some more turtles by now. And these are all reports by citizens that have gone out to Matagorda Bay. So it's really exciting for us to see this. The idea is this will help us know where the turtles are using the bay, and hopefully we can go there and catch some turtles and put the GPS trackers on them. So what can you do from home? Whether you're inland or at the beach right now, many of us are at home during the pandemic, so this is very relevant for everyone at the moment. As Laura was telling us, try to always buy sustainable food, sustainable seafood. Try to avoid single-use plastic, reuse, and recycle. If you're familiar with a balloon on the sky, try to be responsible or not use helium balloons, because if they do go up to the sky, most likely they will fall into the sea. Take the pledge to many of the No Straws movements. The Inland Ocean Coalition has a really good campaign. You can join their pledge on the web link on the slide. Don't pour oil down the drain. There's many ways to recycle cooking oil, so try to find some ways to recycle it near your area. And spread the word. Be an active voice for change in your community. If you're looking at this presentation, I trust that you are environmentally conscious, but many people around you might not be, so be an active voice. Tell them some of these things that you've learned today and some others that you might know. That's very important, and we can all do it from home through social media or when we're able to go out again and meet with people. So that would be all from us. You're about to get another poll from us, so tell us what will you be doing to make a change? And you can select more than one. Let us know and we'll share the results in a second. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. These are our contact information, and we'll be taking some questions now.
Okay, so while we're waiting for that poll number to come up, we can go ahead and go through some of these questions. These great questions have been coming throughout the presentations. We did have a question on how Hurricane Laura is going to affect the sea turtles. Will the sea turtles be displaced because of the hurricane? I don't know if Natalie or you could speak on that maybe.
So right now, here in Texas, the sea turtle season is already over, so there won't be much of an microphone again. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So here in Texas, I don't think there's going to be much of a problem for sea turtles because the sea turtle season is almost over. Well, it ended at the beginning of August, and where Laura is going to cross, there are not many sea turtle nesting anyway. There might have been some nests that were affected through the Caribbean as it moved across the Caribbean, but I don't foresee many impacts on Texan turtles.
Okay, well that's good news. Okay, and Jace, kind of a question for you. A question about doing the NURDLE patrol. Can that also be done along rivers and lakes? Is that something that can be done like in man-made lakes here in Texas?
Yeah, for sure. If you have a plastics plant that is near you or a railroad that is distributing those pellets, yeah, rivers, streams, lakes, they're finding them all up in the Great Lakes, which are big lakes. But, as you just described in Dallas, Fort Worth, you're finding them near the plastic manufacturing site. And so, yeah, anywhere you can find them. And remember, zeros are data too. So if you go out and you don't find any, put a 0 in, and maybe that's a good spot to not find any. So, but they can also go to the map on the nurdlepatrol.org if they're interested in saying, oh, I wonder if there's some data that's been collected around me. They can zoom in right to their community and see if there's some there.
And on nurdlepatrol.org, which I'll put that in the chat, your email address is available there as well because someone was asking for your email address.
Yeah, I typed it into the chat box here,
okay.
But also they can go to the bottom of nurdlepatrol.org on the homepage and it'll be there as well.
Okay, great. Great, thank you. Looks like I have a question for Laura. Have TEDs been adopted internationally?
Yes, actually, in most places. So while the U.S. did quite a bit in developing TED technology and implementing it here, NOAA, our National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who manages our fisheries, actually has a program where they've done that technology transfer to over 40 different countries. And we do have some rules about importing seafood into the US based on conservation requirements, specifically for shrimp, and areas or countries that are known to have turtles have to have similar TED regulations in place for wild capture fisheries in order to bring their products into the US. So it has been adopted globally, yes.
Okay, great, thank you so much. Have another NURDLE question. Let's see, like how do they count, like if you're finding NURDLES and you're finding, let's say so many that you can't count, like how do you calculate that based on like a 10-minute survey?
Yeah, so the protocol is once you pick up your first NURDLE, then you start your clock for 10 minutes.
Yep.
And then say if you find a few hundred and you're like, I don't want to count all those. Well, you can get, there's a couple different ways you can do it, but you can get a teaspoon, put them in a teaspoon and count how many are just in that teaspoon. Then you can do multiple teaspoons and you already know how many are in one. And so that's a fast way. Now, if you're finding, 4,000 to 15,000 or something like that, you can use a cup. I think there's about 4,000 NURDLES go into a cup. And so,
Gotcha. Okay. And Natalie, and maybe even Laura, how can people volunteer with like a turtle research and conservation? Is there some volunteer work that people can sign up for as like a citizen?
Do you want to take this, Laura?
Sure, I can try. So some of the programs along the coast that do monitoring of turtle nesting, like the Turtle Island Restoration Network up in the Galveston area, and at the National Seashore here in Padre Island, do utilize volunteers to identify and mark nests during turtle nesting season. So if you're along the coast, that is an option for people to participate in. If there is interest in research, I would suggest looking at people like the Plotkin Lab, looking at some academic universities. If you're interested in research in turtles, a lot of labs do have opportunities for people to volunteer in the research that you can help participate in. And you know, I know Natalie mentioned a couple of other aspects along the coast in terms of, you know, using the iSeaturtle app and things along those lines.
Great, thank you. And one question that just popped up that I'm actually very curious about, because I don't know what to do with mine, is Jace, what do you do with the nurdles once you find them?
Do not send them to me. That's what people try to do. They're like, what's your address? I'm going to send you all my nurdles. No, don't do that. But I say put them in a cool little jar like you have, because you're able to now tell other people what they are. You know, some people use them for artwork. So, you know, it's just another way that you can educate folks about what a nurdle is, what the problem is, and what's being done about it. So I've got a lot of cool little jars that I put them in. Most of mine I keep in the sample bag that I got them in, because I have all the data of, you know, when they were collected, where, and all that. And that's for future research or litigation. And so I have researchers all the time contacting me that want to do work on plastics, whether it's chemicals in the plastics or whatever. And so I just sent them a you know, envelope full. And so I would keep them. And if you don't want to, say you really want to get rid of them, put them in your kitchen bag that usually you can tie up. You can't recycle it. It's too small. And you can't just throw it into a trash bin. They'll fall out again. So. Yep.
Okay, just a couple more questions. We are a little bit over time, so and we want to be respectful of everybody's time. Natalie, what is the evolutionary advantage for higher temperatures to have more females than males?
It's not really an advantage. It's a problem that we are facing at the moment. If the temperatures get too hot, then we're going to have so many females and not enough males, and they might still be able to reproduce, but there's something called genetic diversity, and it's just, we want to be as diverse as possible. So we want them to mix, so they have a better chance, they're stronger, they have a stronger immune system, or very different aspects. The more diverse you are in your genes, the better. So that's why we want we want more males, or not so many females and just a few males. We want both females and a lot of males. So that's actually not I don't see it as an advantage, and at the moment, yeah.
Is there like any thoughts on ways to increase like the male population, like with climate change, like a captive breeding or something?
There's a lot of, you can work on the beach. There's a lot of conservation efforts put towards putting shades on the nest, or moving them towards a place that is not as hot in place. This doesn't happen in every beach, but it has been happening in some big important beaches around the world. So in those places, they are putting shades on the nest or moving them around just to have a little bit more of a balance between females and males.
Okay, great. Well, we didn't get into a lot of questions, but I have saved them, so I can send them to our panelists, and hopefully we can get some answers for y'all sent out after this this webinar. But we'll go ahead and end with our poll numbers. It says, what will you do today to make change? And it looks like the majority of you said that you would like to buy delicious, sustainable seafood. We can also provide some resources for that as well, and where you can purchase that. But I'm liking these numbers, you know, 77% for sustainable foods, 62% for helium balloons, no more of those. You know, these are great numbers, and I'm really happy to see it. thank you again to all of our panelists today. Your presentations were phenomenal. I learned a lot today, so I'm sure our viewers learned a lot as well. And I appreciate all of y'all that tuned in. We'll have another one of these hopefully soon enough. So thank you again so much. Y'all take care.